An army collapses first, not at the front, but far behind it, on the rails. On the night of August 16th, Ukraine struck exactly there. Russia's entire southern front hangs on one thing, the railway. Ammunition, fuel, heavy equipment, all of it flows over those rails. And that night, Ukraine hit one of the most critical bridges still standing on that line. But this was never about a single bridge. The same night, the depots those rails feed and the system Crimea uses to rain missiles on Ukraine were struck as well. 3 regions, 1 logic, to cut one by one the last links holding Russia's south and Crimea together. And what was cut that night cannot be easily replaced. Russia lost things behind the front that will not be swapped out in days. Beyond that, there is the first sign of something far bigger. Crimea, thought untouchable for years, is slowly being severed from the mainland. Before we get to exactly what Russia lost that night and how Crimea's link to the mainland is being cut, we have just one request. Independent war and geopolitics analysis like this gets suppressed by the algorithm. Subscribing, liking the video, and leaving a comment directly helps this content reach the people who care about it. Now let's continue. According to Ukraine's general staff, 3 coordinated strikes were carried out that night. In Zaporizhzhia, a railway bridge near Svitlodolinska. In Donetsk, Russian logistics and ammunition depots near Kharlivka. And in Crimea, a missile unit deployed near Reservoir, not far from Sevastopol. These 3 targets lie hundreds of kilometers apart, but there is an invisible thread linking them, and that thread is, in a word, logistics. What keeps an army standing at the front is not courage or numbers. It is the uninterrupted flow of ammunition, fuel, and supply. When that flow stops, even the strongest army falls silent within days. And that is what Ukraine struck. Not the soldier at the front, but the vein feeding that soldier. These 3 strikes are really links in a single chain. The bridge is the vein itself, the main road to the front. The depots are the reservoir where the cargo carried by that road collects. And the missile unit is the fist that logistics feeds, the firepower reaching from Crimea into Ukraine. By hitting all 3 the same night, Ukraine struck the vein, the reservoir, and the fist at once. Not a single point, but an entire system. The timing is telling too. Mid-August, the height of summer logistics, when Russia has to both feed the front and prepare for winter. To strike 3 lines hundreds of kilometers apart on the same night at exactly this moment is not coincidence but a calculated choice. Because doing so requires knowing who is vulnerable where and when. That is, deep intelligence and cold-blooded coordination. With these strikes, Ukraine showed not only 3 targets, but how far inward its reach now extends. And there is this. Ukraine did it not on Russia's own soil, but on its own occupied territory. It showed it can reach into the depths Russian forces consider safe in the rear. And this was no one-night sortie. It was the latest link in a campaign that, over recent weeks, has repeatedly and systematically eroded Russian logistics and missile infrastructure across the occupied regions. The most critical link in that chain, though, was the one that looked most ordinary at first glance, that railway bridge. A railway bridge is a tiny dot on the map, but in modern war, that tiny dot can hold up an entire front. Rails carry weight that roads cannot. A single freight train does the work of hundreds of trucks in one run. An army's daily ammunition, fuel, and heavy equipment needs can flow efficiently only over rails. When the railway is cut, Russia has to build a far larger and far more visible truck-based logistics chain to move the same load, and a lumbering convoy is a ready-made target for the drones overhead. The Svitlodolinska bridge did exactly that. It was one of the main arteries feeding Russia's southern lines. And here is the point. This bridge was one of the few key crossings still standing on that line. For months, Ukraine has been systematically striking Russia's rail links, reaching into the south and toward Crimea. Every bridge that falls makes the remaining ones even more vital. This crossing, too, was one of the last knots left in that steadily thinning web. The southern front feels this dependence especially sharply, because in this region, Russian forces fight across wide, open terrain at the end of long supply lines. Everything must be hauled from depots far from the front. In a structure like that, the railway is not a luxury, but a condition of survival. And repairing a struck bridge is harder than it sounds. The repair crews have to work in the open, under the shadow of the very same drones. So Russia does not just lose a bridge, it loses every day that passes until that bridge is raised again. When a bridge like this collapses, cargo has to shift onto alternative routes, and those routes are longer, slower, far more exposed. As convoys cover more ground, they stay open to the drones for longer. Ammunition reaches the front late, personnel rotation stalls, and most of all, the bridge itself is not easily repaired. Fixing a length of rail can take days. Raising a bridge again takes weeks, even months, and demands heavy engineering. That is exactly what no way back means here. The struck bridge is not something that can be quickly replaced. One of the main roads to the front will stay closed for a long time. When a vein is cut, the reservoir it feeds begins to run dry. That is why, the same night, the depots at the end of those rails were hit too. The depots near Karlivka, thanks to their closeness to the front, provided fast resupply. When facilities like this are struck, local stocks melt away and resupply times stretch out. The Russian side has to hold more material in the rear, and that limits the ammunition the forward units can burn through. In the heat of intense fighting, the absence of a single depot turns directly into a loss of firepower. So the bridge cuts the vein, and the depot strike empties the reservoir. Together, they choke the southern front's breathing. The most valuable target of the night, though, was in Crimea. The missile unit that was struck was no ordinary unit. It was the launch positions and deployment area of Russia's Bastion coastal missile system. The Bastion is a scarce, extremely expensive platform in Russia's inventory. It was originally designed to hit enemy ships, but Russia pushed it beyond its purpose, using it to fire from the Black Sea coast at ground targets in Ukraine's southern cities. The missiles it launches are not ordinary either. The supersonic Onyx and the hypersonic Zircon, weapons whose speed lets them punch through air defenses. And here is the real brilliance of this strike. Russia was firing very fast, very expensive missiles that air defenses struggle to stop. Catching those missiles one by one in the air is both extremely hard and a way to burn through dwindling multi-million-dollar interceptors. Ukraine, instead of chasing the missile across the sky, struck the system that launches the missile. It solved the problem at the source. This is, in effect, an alternative to air defense. Rather than trying to down each missile one by one, you remove the platform that fires them and neutralize all of that platform's future missiles at the same time. The asymmetry makes the picture even starker. According to footage released by Ukraine's Navy, the systems used in the strike were FP-2 drones, relatively cheap, unmanned. On one side, a rare missile platform that is hard to build and expensive to replace. On the other, a comparatively cheap drone that struck it. The Navy announced that significant losses in equipment and personnel had been sustained, with the final tally still being assessed. Every loss of a system produced in such small numbers narrows Russia's long-range strike options a little further. Just how valuable this platform is lies partly in the technical detail. The system comes in two forms: the mobile Bastion P carried on a truck, and the fixed, silo-based Bastion S. Being mobile normally makes it very hard to hit. They can fire and relocate and stay hidden. The Onyx missile it launches weighs close to 3 tons, so the launcher lifts it into the air with a special booster that steers the missile toward its target before the main motor ignites. This is no simple rocket rail. It is a complex piece of engineering built in small numbers, and this is not even Ukraine's first strike on a Bastion system. Back in March of this year, Ukrainian forces announced they had hit a Bastion launcher. The meaning cuts both ways. Russia keeps trying to deploy replacements as it loses these valuable systems, and Ukraine can repeatedly find and strike these mobile hiding platforms. And hitting a mobile launcher requires finding it first: sharp intelligence, a satellite and drone network, and the skill to catch the right moment. Ukraine pulling this off again and again shows that Crimea is no longer a safe hiding place for Russian systems. There is also a direct human side to this strike. Those missiles the Bastion launches often landed on Ukraine's southern cities, on civilian areas. So silencing that launcher is not only the destruction of a military target, it means cutting off, in advance, every new missile that platform could fire. That is, protecting civilians directly. Rather than trying to catch each arrow in the air, you break the bow that fires them. Break one bow, and you stop every arrow it could ever loose at the same time. What truly makes this Bastion strike matter goes beyond a single system. It changes Crimea's status. To see Crimea's place in this war, you have to go back a little. Since Russia annexed the peninsula in 2014, it has made it the heart of its military power in the Black Sea. Sevastopol was the main base of Russia's Black Sea fleet. The peninsula was the logistics hub and missile launch platform for every operation in the south. For Russia, Crimea was not just a piece of land, but a symbol of prestige and power. But as the war went on, that symbol began to crack. When naval drones threatened Sevastopol, Russia had to pull part of its fleet back to ports it considered safer. Now the erosion has reached the missile systems and the logistics lines. And this is where the peninsula's most sensitive vein comes in, the links binding Crimea to Russia. Geographically, Crimea is tied to the Russian mainland only by narrow passages. For years, the symbol of that bond was the famous Kerch Bridge. While Ukraine keeps pressure on that bridge, it is also striking, one by one, the railway bridges that connect the peninsula to the occupied southern territories. In fact, just a few weeks ago, on a night in early August, Ukraine struck the Sivash railway bridge near Chonhar, which links the peninsula to the mainland, and another bridge near Vladislavivka. In the same period, a facility storing naval drones and a reconnaissance unit of the Black Sea Fleet were hit as well. Now the Bastion missile system has been added to that list. So Crimea's logistics veins, its naval power, and its missile launch capacity are all eroding at once. The most symbolic of these links is, without doubt, the Kerch Bridge. Opened with grand ceremonies in 2018, this bridge was, for Russia, a physical monument sealing the annexation of Crimea, the main road and rail line connecting the peninsula directly to the Russian mainland. But throughout the war, this bridge too was targeted again and again, damaged, repaired, and every hit was, for the Kremlin, not just a logistical, but a symbolic blow. Now, with the pressure on this bridge on one side and the railway bridges at the peninsula's western gate on the other, Crimea's entire physical bond with the mainland is being strained at once. And on the peninsula, there are large numbers of Russian troops, countless missile systems, and a vast logistics infrastructure. Feeding all of it depends on exactly these narrowing lines. As the lines thin, every asset there becomes a little more isolated, a little more exposed. The result is plain. Crimea is starting to behave like an island, and a place ceasing to be a safe rear is a far heavier consequence for an army than it might seem. Because a safe rear is where an army breathes, regroups, and builds up strength. When that space comes under threat, the army has to stay on guard not only at the front, but in its own depth. Crimea, once Russia's greatest asset and source of pride, is slowly turning into a vulnerability that must be defended, a burden. And the cost of that is not only military. Crimea was Russia's biggest prestige investment in this war, the symbol of a victory presented as irreversible. Having that symbol encircled like an island leaves a far deeper mark than the loss of any patch of ground at the front, because the issue is no longer a piece of territory, but the collapse of the claim to invulnerability that territory represented. When a fortress turns into a weak point that must be defended, that is, for the one holding it, far more than a change on the map. The real logic beneath all of this is a war of cost. With comparatively cheap drones and precision strikes, Ukraine pushes Russia into a far more expensive burden of defense. When a drone hits a bridge or a launcher, Russia now feels it has to protect every bridge, every depot, every system. But protecting everything at once is impossible. A low-cost strike produces a high-cost defense spread thin across a vast area. The attacker spends little and wears down much, while the defender spends much and still cannot cover everywhere. The bare math bears this out. An attack drone can be produced at a comparatively modest cost. A Bastion system, or the supersonic and hypersonic missiles it fires, are multi-million-dollar assets that take a long time to replace. And sanctions tilt this picture even further against Russia. Producing a replacement for a rare lost system stretches out further as access to the needed parts is restricted. So a loss like this is a harbinger not only of today's gap, but of one that will last for months. What lets Ukraine do this is a rapidly expanding deep strike arsenal. According to Ukrainian officials, the country now also uses British-made jet-powered drones to strike deep inside Russia. In the same days, a sale of US-made weapons to Ukraine came onto the agenda, including 70 long-range ATACMS missiles, so much so that Moscow openly voiced its displeasure at the sale. The backbone of this arsenal, though, is Ukraine's own domestic production. The country is producing, largely at home, drones that are steadily longer ranged and more numerous, and as production scales, so does the depth it can reach. In recent weeks, Ukraine's strikes have reached facilities more than 2,000 kilometers inside Russia. What is more, the campaign now targets not only launchers and bridges, but the factories that make those weapons. In the same period, Ukraine also struck a plant producing solid rocket fuel for rocket systems like the Uragan, Smerch, and Tornado S. So every link in the chain is a target: the launcher that fires, the bridge that carries, and the factory that makes the fuel for those weapons. And here we also see how war itself has changed. Destroying a bridge or a launcher once required expensive aircraft and the pilots who flew them. The risk was great, the cost high. Now the same job is done by a comparatively cheap machine guided by an operator on the ground. This is not just a change of tactics, it is a shift that redefines who holds power. Owning a few expensive weapons no longer means superiority on its own, because that expensive weapon can be neutralized by something far cheaper, produced in far greater numbers. Still, the tally of these strikes has not yet been fully confirmed by independent sources. Ukraine's statements are consistent with its earlier operations, but the true scale of the damage is not settled by open sources. That kind of uncertainty is standard in war reporting. And more importantly, Russia is far from silent in the face of these blows. That very night, Russia launched heavy drone and missile attacks on many of Ukraine's cities, chief among them Kyiv. And because of a shortage of the Patriot Interceptor, Ukraine's most advanced air defense system, some of those missiles punched through the defenses. At the root of that Patriot shortage lies another war. In its confrontation with Iran, America burned through much of these advanced interceptors, defending its interests and allies in the Gulf. And the amount flowing to Ukraine fell as a result. A weapon spent on a front thousands of kilometers away can leave a Ukrainian city undefended today. The timing is delicate too. Experts warn that Russia is preparing for a wave of air attacks that intensifies through the winter months. So while Ukraine strikes Russia's launchers on one hand, on the other, it faces a race over whether the interceptors that guard its own skies will arrive in time. What we have is not one-sided superiority, but a mutual and merciless war of attrition. As Ukraine erodes Russia's logistics and launchers, Russia keeps targeting Ukraine's cities and infrastructure. This strategy promises no quick victory. It bets on attrition building drop by drop. Ukraine's wager is that this accumulation will one day make Russia's war machine impossible to sustain. Russia's wager is that it can patch every severed line and hold out until Ukraine's resources and patience run out. Which wager pays off? Only time will tell. And the price of this attrition is not paid by Russia alone. Russia's missiles keep falling on Ukraine's cities, its energy infrastructure, its civilian life. And as winter nears, strikes aimed at heating and power lines could directly affect millions of people. That is exactly why Ukraine's launcher hunt is also a race against time. Every system silenced means blocking in advance one of the blows that would come in winter. On one side, the effort to cut the veins feeding the front. On the other, the struggle to keep its own cities standing. And both depend on the same scarce resources, the same clock. An army can lose a battle and then recover, but a severed spine is not repaired so quickly. That night, Ukraine did not advance the front line by a single meter. Instead, it cut the veins behind that front. A bridge, a reservoir of ammunition, and the fist firing from Crimea itself. And it left behind a picture that will not be easily undone. A line that will stay closed for weeks, a rare weapon that cannot be quickly replaced, and a peninsula turning steadily into an island. For Russia, Crimea was once an untouchable fortress. Now it is an island being cut from the mainland, ever harder to feed. Ukraine has set aside the question of who is stronger at the front. The question it now asks is far simpler and far more merciless. Who can feed this war machine longer? And the side asking that question has learned to strike Russia not where it looks strongest, but through its most invisible vein. So do you think Ukraine's cut the vein strategy can really break Russia's southern front over time? Or will Russia manage to patch every severed line with a new one? And how will Crimea's turn into an island change the balance in the south? Share your thoughts in the comments. To stay informed about independent war and geopolitics analysis, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Thank you for choosing us.